quagmire. When you woke up this morning, did you purposely say, I'm going to confine myself to a box? Or do you just avoid putting any conscious thought into today? When you're busy going at it, literally or figuratively, do you ever find yourself pausing for a moment to realize what's going on? Or are you just reacting? When you hear the saying, may I have your attention please, do you continue as you were, or do you consider the information you're about to receive might actually be valuable? When I was growing up, my mother used to ask me to do things, and sometimes her reasoning was, because I said so. Looking back, I wish perhaps I took the time to pause, think, and consider the ramifications of my choices. Good Wednesday to you. Today is Wednesday, September 21st, 2016. This is episode number 8 of the podcast, Pause, Think, Consider. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time today to listen to this episode. For those of you that have been with us, that have been listening, maybe this is your first time listening. If you would please go on to iTunes. Maybe you're not an Apple user. Irrelevant. Please go on to iTunes and rate us. Give us a comment. Give a rating for the podcast Pause, Think, Consider. You can search for pause.think.consider and you will find us. Give a rating, give a comment. It enables other people to find us, enjoy what you have had the ability to enjoy over the past week and a half. I thank you in advance. Today, we're going to go over the topic of why do we quit? Why do we quit? More information, you can go to the website pausethinkconsider.com/quitters. Why do we quit? Quitting has many different connotations to it, many different perceptions, many different philosophies. One of those being, and it's more on the pro side of things, that quitting is potentially changing direction. It's potentially going a different way. Potentially having a different focus. So let's look at quitting versus changing direction. What is really the difference? My personal belief is that quitting means you are completely cutting off ties. You're drawing a line in the sand, and from that point forward, you will no longer do, attend, look, see, eat, taste, smell that particular thing. Versus changing directions, which some people to have a more positive spin on quitting. Changing directions, my personal opinion, is you're not necessarily quitting, yet you're continuing to pursue that overall goal. You're pivoting. You're changing directions. You have a vision, a main purpose, and you are not quitting that purpose. You're merely changing your focus so that you can still pursue that direction. You can still pursue that overall goal. Now, I'll use an example. Quitting a company. Let's say you quit your job, but you're still pursuing the vision. So you quit the job, but you stay in the same sector. You stay in the same industry. For example, I work in, or have worked in, and I know it's very popular in this industry, but the advertising agency world, very hip, very modern, very progressive. And yet, individuals move and bounce around in this industry all the time. Some will like to lay blame to millennials and having a millennial input because statistics show that every 2.5 years, I believe is the average, that a millennial individual will change organizations. There's always the thought and theory, and we're not trying to get down a rabbit hole, as we certainly could on this topic of employment and loyalty of employment. But potentially it's necessary to change companies to move laterally in order to move up. There's no possibilities of moving up. And so you might leave an organization, but yet you are still in pursuit of that overall goal. You could say, well, they quit that organization. You could say they quit on that company's mission. But I'm going to take the perspective that they're just changing directions. They're pivoting. Maybe they're quitting a particular aspect. Maybe they're quitting a portion of that, but the overall goal and vision is still there. So, why do we quit? My personal belief is that it's just easier to start all over again. There's been a lot of information out in the news. Again, not to get into politics, this is not a politics podcast. This isn't me discussing my personal beliefs, but it's just information out there. You look at Mr. Donald Trump and the number of times that he has been bankrupt. And in the world of being an entrepreneur and the startup world, I'm going to butcher this, and I will find the statistic and post it on pausethinkconsider.com/quitters. But it's something like 90% of businesses fail. They fail. And you look at Mr. Donald Trump and the number of times that he's been bankrupt over his life. I think the number is 6. I'll post that as well. But for people that go bankrupt, for people that abandon their startup, they start something new, I believe it's just easier sometimes to start all over again. And it's easier because when you are in the muck, when you're in the dirt, when you're in the grime, when things are not going well, it's stressful. It is stressful. It's unhealthy for you. It's unhealthy for your circle, your squad, your family. It's incredibly time consuming. Because when things are going easy, when things are going great, you take vacation, you don't have to be, you're not micromanaging. Life is good. But when things aren't going well, you're going to be all up in there. You want to know about everything. Because it's your baby. Whether it's just your job or your company, you're going to invest even more time. And that might even be the opposite of what you should be doing. But that's why I think it's easier to start all over again, or it's not comfortable. I think, and this is a personal belief, I think as a society we need to get better about learning to be comfortable when we're uncomfortable. So when we're uncomfortable, it's just easier to start all over again. I use the analogy or reference of video games. I used to, as a kid, was very much into sport video games. And one of my favorite things to do, I used to stay up for hours. Hours. A buddy of mine, Eric Weiss, I can remember, I don't think it was a birthday party, but being at his mom's house, and we were playing NCAA college football. And my favorite thing to do was to do the draft or to do recruiting. Especially in football or basketball or baseball. There's always an optimizer. I wanted to get the best team humanly possible. I wanted to get the best recruit. And I would just simulate through the entire season, then go to the draft. And I would spend hours on the draft meticulously analyzing the numbers and how I could make this person better. And Eric and I, good Lord, when we played a couple games, but then we got to the recruiting. Yeah, we were Oregon State Beavers, and by the end of us doing everything, we were getting blue chip recruits. Yeah. Okay, if anybody's an Oregon State Beaver fan, you know, until you got the Rogers brothers being blue chip recruits, they don't happen as often as they do at University of Oregon. Okay, that's not a pot shot. That's just reality. I'm a New York Mets fan. They don't get the superstars that the Yankees do. It's the same thing. Same thing. But we stayed up quite literally till 6 a.m. just looking at recruits and getting recruits. But in doing that, in doing it on my own, I use that as an example for how crazy I was about just looking at the draft, is when I would do it on my own and I wouldn't, because it's all an algorithm. I mean, the people that code video games, they've just got all these different scenarios randomly generated, is when I didn't get the output that I wanted, hit the reset button. No, I want to draft this individual. And I've been playing for 4 hours straight. And I've done this before and I know it's possible. So I'm just going to keep hitting the reset button until it happens. Oh, got it. Well, it took me 15 minutes. Cool. I'm going to start all over. With this individual. I draft. Oh, man. I am going to have a team now. It's uncomfortable. So that's why potentially looking at that example, I quit. I would rather have everything perfect than to maybe have something less than ideal and go through it and try and make it better. So I think it's easier to start all over again. So we don't want to deal with the stress. It's time consuming. We're not comfortable. I think another reason why we quit is we are socially accepting of people that quit. And we are inspired to the point of even being mesmerized by people that persevere and overcome. Oh, we are a society that is built on second and third and fourth chances. We love the underdog. And I'll give you a story. There's an individual, we'll just call him in a activity group. And we started doing this activity at the same time. A bunch of my buddies and I all do the same thing. And this individual was just a screw-up. I mean, an absolute train wreck. And yet was successful, was given opportunities. More opportunities than necessarily we got. And aside from the fact of knowing he was a screw-up, he was a pompous asshole. Always talked about himself. And always like, oh yeah, I'm getting this opportunity and XY opportunity and this person's contacting me about this. It's like, what are you kidding me? There's no way. And they weren't. They loved the attention, the ego. They were boasted on. But you know what? Eventually, things caught up to him, as everything does. Everything catches up to us. And it caught up to him, and he was gone. Yep. Fired, let go, contract terminated, whatever you want to call it. Gone. And he was off the face of the planet, essentially, for a couple years. About 2 to 3 years. And then all of a sudden, he was back. Came to a training session, and there he was. And he had a great story. Had a really good story. Came up to myself and my circle, who now after these couple of years, we were a little more prominent and a little bit more of a leadership position, and came up to us and essentially said, hey, I was a screw up. Completely own it. I'm a different man. I know you guys have a lot of stuff going on. You're leaders of our community. I want in. Invite me to any and everything. I'm your guy. And they owned it. They went up to the main leadership, the people that did the hiring, that had the contracts. I explained to them, yep, I was a screw up. Totally owned it. Completely owned it. Completely owned it. Yep, I am married now. I have a kid. I'm in the military. Changed man. And then they went out there and performed, and magically they got another chance. And I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, does nobody see this guy is the biggest screw up on the face of the planet? And the ironic thing, that first year back, they were almost getting more now I was getting different opportunities. Maybe it was more leadership, but they got opportunities that I wanted. I was definitely jealous, and definitely it was a sensitive subject to me. And this person was like, they'd never lost a step. Like they weren't on double secret probation or anything. They'd been around for the past 4 years. We were all on the same level. It's like, dude, where the hell have you been? And you're getting these opportunities. And it was, oh yeah, I got X, Y, and Z, and I'm doing A, B, and C. It's like, are you kidding me? It was, and I remember talking with my close counterparts in our group and saying, you know, here I am. I've been sitting here, and I have done everything right. Like quite literally. I haven't slipped up. I haven't had a problem. I'm just a good person, a good dude. I follow up. I do the right thing. I'm not a problem. And yet, this jerk off who flamed out was like a dumpster fire. He gets cast aside, comes back, and he's like the second coming. Like, are you kidding me? I'm like, it's almost in my favor. Like the way that this is showcasing to me, it's almost in my favor. And where I really got this opinion to go be a screw up, I would be better off just obliterating myself, my reputation, everything. And then building myself back up and coming back and resurrecting myself. Because that is essentially what we showcased. What, as a group, we were saying, you know, that behavior, that's okay. Yeah, you know, he gets a second chance. Well, guess what? 2 years later, same old story. Once a screw up, always a screw up. And same thing happened, gone. Well, guess what? They're not getting another chance. But it was just mind-boggling, and it still is to this day. Why we are so socially accepting of people that quit and then inspired and mesmerized by those who overcome and persevere. And this person didn't quit. They were let go, but we'll call it quitting. It's similar. They got out, and then they came back. And we love that story. We love that story socially. We love to give second, third, fourth chances. So my question is, since at this point you're probably getting a feel that quitting is bad, has a negative connotation to it. So when is it okay to quit? When is it okay to quit? Because personally, I am not okay with quitters. Pivoting, changing directions, continuing to pursue the overall goal, I'm okay with. But quitting, it's like a 4-letter word. It's because it is. So when is it okay to quit? I believe it's okay to quit when it is detrimental to your family and your personal well-being. Examples would be drugs, a poor lifestyle, abusive relationship. It's okay to quit. In fact, I think because quitting has such a negative connotation, and it can often be hard. It can be very challenging. Some things we wish we could quit, other things we quit too easily. Drugs, poor lifestyle, abusive relationship, those are challenging. But they are probably also the most important things to quit. And there are, if you're somebody that's going through something that's detrimental to your family or personal well-being, there's help. There is ways to get help. You are not alone. You do not have to do this alone. There are people that you might not even know about, or have heard about, or thought about that can help you. I believe in those situations, it is okay to quit. So when is it not okay to quit? We've established when it's okay. When is it not? I am such a firm believer in relationships, and that relationships are what enriches and helps define our lives. So, aside from the example I gave about an abusive relationship, other relationships, and I'm going to take the specific approach of divorce, it's not okay. Personal belief, divorce is not okay. If it's an abusive relationship, okay. Aside from that, not okay. My grandparents, and full transparency, if we're going to be technical, they're not my grandparents, but out of respect to them, out of respect to what they mean and what they signify for me, I call and consider them my grandparents. It's no disrespect to my actual grandparents, but I consider them like a grandparent to me. So that is why I call them my grandparents. So their story of their relationship, they've unfortunately both passed on, but they have a relationship story that is, it's not commonplace anymore. It's incredibly unique. My parents' story is also unique as well, which is where I'll share that in a moment. But my grandparents' story, my grandfather decided to go out to a party. And it was, I don't know what the technical term for it is, a wedding party, a bachelorette party, wedding shower. Went to this party and met the bride-to-be, and said to his buddy knew the bride-to-be. And so brought along my grandfather. And he went, whew, boy, that gal, man, she's something else. Well, I don't know all the semantics that happened, but essentially, a few weeks later, Nana winds up calling it off. And they wind up getting together. My grandfather, who they had met at this party. And from that day forward, they were together for the rest of their lives. And I said that's unique, not only from the standpoint of how they met, but that they were together every day. And I know in looking at my own personal relationship with Jean, we are apart constantly. Long distance relationship, almost the exact opposite of my grandparents' story. But when you are together with somebody that much, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be difficulties. You're not necessarily going to want to be around each other probably every moment of every day. But they were together every day. I know it wasn't from that point forward that they were 100% together, but it was years. I think the first time that they were actually apart was right around when I was born, actually. One of them was able to come up and the other wasn't. And so they were actually apart for a night. It's the first time since they'd been together that they'd been apart. And that was years. Years. But just that commitment of being together. And that doesn't mean that their relationship was rosy. But they were, as my mother would describe it and as I would describe it, they were amazing together. Absolutely amazing. They were some of the best examples I have ever seen about being in a relationship, honoring each other, and working through things. I mean, I watched them argue, watched them get into fights, disagreements, but they moved on. They got through it. They were committed to each other. There was nothing that was going to split them apart. Ever. And fortunately, they're both together again now. My parents, similar story. And I use this example because I think it really builds into a point that I would like to make about why it is not okay to quit on a marriage. My parents met together in New York, Boys and Girls Club. Father was the basketball referee. Mother was the player. Mother was the dirty basketball player that she is. Dad fouled her out, walked her home. Kind of the rest is history in terms of getting together. So they were together for years. And then there was the proposal. Gave mom the ring and everything. And then, and I'm sure I'm butchering this story, but essentially, I'm not going to say it was cold feet, but wasn't sure anymore. Wanted to make sure that he wanted to go through with it. And probably still a sore subject with mom to these days, but it worked out. And took the ring back. Yeah. Took the ring back. Asked for it back. Said, I'm not sure. So they went their separate ways. Dad did not date anyone in, I think it was at least a year that they were apart. Mom, ironically, dated another man by the name of Alan. My dad's name is Alan, so she must have had a thing for Alans. So about a year. And then Dad came back and said, I'm sure. I'm ready. Please. Take me back. And she did. And, I'm going to get in trouble, but I believe it is 34 years this past year that they just, September 5th, 34 years. They've been married, they've been together, I think now 40 years together. So, a long time. A long time. And I've watched firsthand the disagreements, the arguments, so forth, but again, another great example. Not everything's perfect. Not everything's rosy. Yet they make it work. They're committed to each other. And I don't know if it's the media to blame. I don't really know who it is that we should blame in terms of, and maybe just because it's more prevalent because of the media. Maybe divorce was prominent prior to my generation, but it just seems like it's something that happens all the time. Like, oh yeah, getting a divorce. Almost like I went to Starbucks and got a cup of coffee. You look at movie stars, athletes, famous individuals. And it almost feels like divorce is expected. It almost feels like an expectation. Oh, it's great. Look at the romance that these two have. And they're together. They've been together a whole 6 months and they're engaged. Oh, isn't that lovely? And then what happens? They get the prenup. They get a prenup. The dreaded P word. And I say that because my personal belief, a prenup, maybe if I was that wealthy, and maybe if I was that famous, my circle, people in my family would advise me that a prenup was the right thing to do. But I personally don't believe in them. Maybe because I don't have the kind of assets that those individuals have, but marriage, my personal belief, should be for love. I know there's plenty of people, plenty of selfish individuals out there that are just thinking about themselves. It's like Anna Nicole Smith, who her husband, who was a gajillionaire, passed away, and then she became a gajillionaire. No prenup there. Nope. But selfish act, looking from afar, not understanding the situation. But I would never get a prenup personally. Because marriage should not be about those assets. It should be about love and respect. And I look at all the individuals, famous, unfamous, in my circle, out of my circle, the ones that wind up getting a divorce. And the question I always ask is, why did you get married? Why did you get married? Nobody says you have to. This is between two individuals. Take whatever pressure outside of it. Maybe it's the pressure that you're getting from that potential partner of yours. You're feeling the heat. No one says you have to get married. Oh, but if I don't do it, they're going to leave me and they're the best thing that ever. No. Nobody is forcing you. Nobody's forcing you. And this gets right into how I believe we can prevent quitting and divorces. It's a couple of interesting thoughts, a couple of interesting opinions. Huffington Post has some interesting thoughts in regards to 5 ways to avoid divorce. Forbes.com, getting away from divorce and marriage specifically. Forbes.com, how to quit being a quitter. And then taking a flip side of things. It's a good perspective. It's one I definitely encourage you reading. tinybuddha.com and 5 valid reasons to be a quitter. So a pro-quitter article. If you want to read these articles, check them out. Please visit the website pausethinkconsider.com/quitters. So my personal belief on how we can prevent quitting and divorces, I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible, is 2 things. Number 1, challenge the social and societal pressures. One of my favorite sayings my circle says is, you do you. You do you. Whatever you want to do, your choice. You do you. I'll make a caveat with that though. You do you, but take your goddamn time. Take your goddamn time. You need to test and vet everything. Test and vet everything. In the case of employment, no one says you have to take that job. No one said. Maybe you're getting whatever pressure. You know what? You do you. Take your goddamn time before you make a decision. You want to make a decision as for the long-term well-being of yourself, your family, and hopefully the frickin' organization you're joining. Test and vet everything. Leave no stone unturned. And some people will argue, well, you don't have that much time. You have to live in the moment. You can't be a planner, Jesse. I've heard that before. You can't plan and vet, and it would be nice, but sometimes you just have to make a decision. Well, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. Nobody's saying you have to. Challenge that social pressure, the societal pressures from the media, from your friends, from your family. You do you. But please, take your goddamn time. And to pivot on the divorce side of things, relationships, personal advice, get beyond the lust. Get beyond the lust, and I encourage you to experience some tough times together. If you are thinking, discussing, pondering engagement and getting together and making this a permanent relationship with rings and documents and joint bank accounts, I hope you have gone through some tough times. And if you haven't, maybe you need to take some time. I'm not saying go create some animosity, go do something that you would regret that causes some obstacles to get through. I'm not encouraging that. I'm just saying throughout life, not everything is going to be roses. You're going to be faced with challenges. And if you haven't experienced that in a relationship, how do you know how to handle it? Because as positive as you try and be, and as much as you try and eliminate negativity and negative thoughts and negative actions through self-awareness, things happen. Life happens. And you have to be able to get through it. And man, when I hear famous actors, musicians, what have you, they have been together for 6 months. 6 months, and there's a proposal, and they're getting married. I just shake my head. What on earth could you possibly have gone through in 6 months? What on earth? And I know, and there's a good buddy of mine that I don't know that he went through, he was a drive-by wedding. And it would be interesting for him to share how he's gotten through this, because I know not everything's been roses. He rolled the dice, and you know what? He hit flipping jackpot. No doubt about it. But he is the outlier. He is the exception to the rule. But I highly advise experiencing some tough times. Because if you can get through it, you can weather anything. You can be like my grandparents. You can be like my parents. I got another good buddy of mine, dated him and his wife 6 years before it happened. Maybe Maybe the woman was looking at the watch, his wife was looking at the watch going, it's about time. It is about time. You do you. You do you. Because it's interesting. When I called Jeannie back after our first date the next morning, social norms say, he's supposed to wait 3 days. Oh gosh, he's a clinger. I had a good time. You do you. Test and vet everything. The final thing, trying to keep it simplistic, and we've talked about listening. Talked about listening last week. We have talked about communication and the effect of responding earlier this week on Monday. But you need to learn to communicate. This includes listening and talking. If you can learn to communicate, it is going to help decrease the likelihood of you quitting, or in the case of marriage, going through a divorce. Let's look at quitting first. General quitting, not quitting via marriage. In an organization, I love this saying, got a buddy of mine. If you talk more than you listen, you are talking too much. If you talk more than you listen, you are talking too much. Another favorite quote of mine, God gave you, and this isn't getting religious, but God gave you 2 ears and only 1 mouth. The art of listening. As I described earlier last week, we all suck at it. So, improving our listening skills is going to help with our communication. And if we actually take a concerted interest in listening, then it is going to enable us to talk. I am an internalizer. I am somebody that, in terms of talking versus listening, I know that would be contrary to some opinions by having a podcast that talks for 30 to 45 minutes each and every weekday. But when it comes to a relationship, I am a much better listener necessarily than a talker. I hold my feelings internally. And generally, they come out, it's kind of like a sneeze. When you hold that sneeze in, and you hold it in and you hold it in, it's usually a lot bigger when it finally comes out. You usually can't completely suppress it. It's either going to happen. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when and to what amplitude, what amplification it's going to be. So the sooner that you can talk about something, that you can get it out, you can get it off your chest, the less venom that's going to be behind it. Which goes with my third point about learning to communicate, is get those emotions out and then figure out what to do. Get them out. When you can get beyond all the emotions, I'm mad, you're mad type of scenarios, boss or marriage, when you can get those emotions out and actually get down to the point, because it's necessary. We all need to blow off steam. We all get stressed. We all get rattled. Even the coolest and calmest of individuals. It happens. So if you can get those emotions out so that you're able to rationally have a conversation, to listen and talk and communicate, you're going to be much more successful. If you do that, I personally believe you're less likely to quit on something, whether that's your job or your marriage. So to recap, why do we quit? We took a look at quitting versus changing direction. And quitting, I define as completely cutting off ties, completely eliminating. Changing direction would be continuing to pursue that overall goal. Quitting a company, but yet staying in the same industry, would still be pursuing the vision you have, but you're just pivoting. You're changing direction. A startup that goes from selling product A to selling product Z, that's a pivot. They still have that overall vision. And I believe that we quit because it's easier to start all over again. When we're in the muck, when things are challenging, it's stressful, it's time consuming, and we're uncomfortable, and we would rather just hit that restart button and start all over again. Start clean, start fresh. Socially, we are very accepting of people that quit. We are understanding. And with people that quit and end up coming back, we are inspired and mesmerized by those people. That they're able to persevere and overcome all the challenges that they had that caused them to quit, and then they came back. Because we, as a society, love to give second, third, and fourth chances. It is okay to quit when it is something that's going to be detrimental to your family and personal well-being. Examples being drugs, poor lifestyle, abusive relationship. Personally, I believe it is not okay to quit on relationships that are not abusive. Within an actual marriage or family, or potentially with work, coworker, school, etc. The media is one of the pain points that I believe that makes it socially acceptable to quit. I gave the example of my parents, my grandparents, but divorce in the media is almost expected. Prenups are made because of that expectation, but yet nobody actually says you have to get married. And so in order to prevent quitting, help prevent divorces, a couple different viewpoints. I would love to hear yours if you have one. Huffington Post gave one. Forbes and tinybuddha.com actually gave one in favor of why quitting is a good thing. Definitely check that one out. But I personally believe that we need to challenge the social and societal pressures and norms. You do you. But in the end, take your goddamn time. Test and vet everything. And in the case of a relationship, get beyond the lust and experience some tough times together. Finally, learn to communicate. Use that art of listening. We all know we have the self-awareness that we suck at it, but we are getting better. So learn to listen and then talk. Don't hold it in. Don't be an internalizer like me. Get it out there as soon as possible. Get the emotions out on the table. And then once those are blown over, figure out what to do next. I want to thank you all for listening today. Please check out the website at pausethinkconsider.com/quitters. Again, don't forget to go on to iTunes. Please rate us. Leave a comment. It doesn't matter if you actually have an account or not. Please just go on there. It will enable other people to find this gem of a podcast that you have found and enjoy on a daily basis. I look forward to talking to you all tomorrow on Pause, Think, Consider.